Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're heading to Gaza.
Oh, interesting.
You probably know it as a place of conflict,
Right.
but Gaza's got this incredible history going back like 4,000 years.
Wow.
We're going to dig into that long history,
Yeah.
explore its significance in the world, and try to understand the region, but through a very specific lens,
Okay.
a Palestinian lens. Our sources really focus on this perspective. So just keep in mind as we're going through all this,
Right.
that we're delving into a specific viewpoint here, not endorsing it.
Right. Of course, exploring a perspective.
Exactly. So it's fascinating to me how Gaza's ancient past really sets the stage for its role in the world today.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to kind of picture it as this like bustling crossroads
Yeah.
for empires and civilizations. You know, Philistines,
Mhm.
Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians,
The whole gang's here.
Greeks, even Alexander the Great
Wow, what a hot spot.
left his mark on this place.
Yeah, it sounds like being a crossroads brought both prosperity and conflict to Gaza.
Exactly. I mean, think of it. This is a prime location on the trade routes connecting continents, a real melting pot of cultures. And that kind of strategic importance makes it a prize worth fighting for,
Yeah.
which explains why empires throughout history have clashed over control of Gaza.
So how do we go from Alexander the Great marching through Gaza
Yeah.
to the conflict that we see in the headlines today?
Well, we have to fast forward
Yeah.
a few centuries,
Okay.
and we get to the Ottoman Empire. They held sway over Gaza for a long time. It wasn't until World War I that things really started to shift.
Okay.
After the war, Gaza became part of the British Mandate for Palestine.
Yeah.
That's a decision that planted the seeds for the discord
Yeah.
we see between Israelis and Palestinians.
And that seems like a pivotal moment.
Right. Oh, that's
And it's closely tied to this term we see in the sources a lot, the Nakba.
Right.
Can you shed some light on what that means for our listeners?
Absolutely. Nakba translates to catastrophe in Arabic. It refers to the displacement
Yeah.
of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians
Yeah.
from their homes during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War.
Okay, so this event is central to the Palestinian narrative
It is.
and really deeply shapes their perspective on this conflict.
That perspective, yeah.
And then Gaza became a haven for many of those refugees
Right.
under Egyptian control.
Exactly.
So even before the 67 war, Gaza was already a focal point in the conflict
It was a focal point.
and a refuge for displaced Palestinians.
Yes.
And then in 1967, the Six-Day War erupts.
That's right.
And Israel takes control of Gaza. And this marks the beginning of the occupation, a period that continues
Yeah.
to define the situation there. But didn't Israel withdraw settlers from Gaza in 2005?
They did, yeah.
They called it a disengagement plan.
They did.
But our sources emphasize that it didn't mean Israel gave up control entirely.
Right.
They still maintain authority over Gaza's borders, its airspace, and even its access to the sea.
Which is why you hear that phrase, open-air prison.
Exactly. It seems like even though the settlers left, the control remained.
Yeah.
That must have had a significant impact on daily life there in Gaza.
Huge impact.
Before we dive into that, I just want to reiterate to everyone listening, our deep dive today is based on material presented from a Palestinian perspective.
Right.
We are not endorsing any particular side here, but it's important for you to know where this information is coming from.
I agree. Yeah, I think understanding different viewpoints is crucial to grasping the complexity of this conflict.
So let's delve into some of the specific issues raised in our sources.
Okay.
They point to the blockade as a major source of hardship for the people of Gaza.
The blockade, which Israel imposed in 2007 after Hamas took control of Gaza. It's had a devastating impact. It restricts the flow of people and goods in and out of Gaza, crippling the economy. This has led to widespread unemployment, poverty, and shortages of essential goods.
The sources even use some strong language to describe the blockade, even calling it collective punishment.
Right, and that's because the impact of the blockade is felt by everyone in Gaza. The UN, along with many human rights organizations, argues that it amounts to collective punishment, which is a violation of international law.
And then on top of that, there are the military offensives that we've all seen in the news.
Yeah.
These have caused immense destruction
Yeah,
and loss of life.
They have, our sources highlight, operations like Cast Lead in 2008, 2009, and Protective Edge in 2014. These military offenses resulted in a large number of Palestinian casualties, including many civilians. They also caused widespread damage to homes, hospitals, and essential infrastructure.
It's tough to even imagine the impact.
Of such a
Very cult reality.
on the people living there. The
Right.
sources also mention reports of indiscriminate targeting of civilians and the use of excessive force. Right? Groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have investigated these claims. And their reports detail allegations of attacks on civilian areas, including schools and hospitals. They also raise concerns about Israel's use of disproportionate force and weapons that cause unnecessary suffering.
And the sources really zero in on the plight of children
Yes.
in Gaza.
It's heartbreaking. The conflict has had a disproportionate impact on children. Thousands have been killed or injured, and countless others suffer from trauma. The blockade also severely limits their access to basic needs like healthcare, education, and even sufficient food. This creates a cycle of hardship that is incredibly difficult to break.
Yeah, it's a deeply concerning situation, especially when you consider the long-term consequences for an entire generation growing up amidst such hardship.
It makes you wonder, where does this leave Gaza today? Our sources paint a pretty bleak picture of the humanitarian situation. Yeah, the situation is indeed dire. Over 80% of the population relies on humanitarian aid to meet their basic needs. Access to essential services like electricity, clean water, and healthcare is severely limited. The UN has even warned that Gaza could become uninhabitable if current trends continue.
That's a stark warning, it sounds like. The people of Gaza
Hmm.
are facing overwhelming challenges.
They are.
But amidst all this hardship, our sources also highlight their incredible resilience.
And that's what's so remarkable. Despite facing such adversity, the people of Gaza continue to strive for a better future. They haven't given up hope. And that spirit of resilience is truly inspiring.
It really speaks to the human spirit's ability to endure, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. But it also begs the question, what are the possible paths towards a resolution, a way out of this seemingly endless conflict, especially for Gaza?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Unfortunately, there are no easy answers. The conflict is deeply entrenched with a long history of mistrust and violence on both sides.
So what are the root causes, then, that need to be addressed for any lasting peace to be achieved?
Well, our sources, focusing on the Palestinian perspective, point to several key issues. The ongoing occupation of Palestinian territories, the blockade of Gaza, and the lack of a viable Palestinian state are at the heart of their grievances. They argue that true peace can only be achieved through ending the occupation, lifting the blockade, and establishing a sovereign Palestinian state that can coexist alongside Israel.
It sounds like the two-state solution that's been discussed for decades, but hasn't really gained much traction.
Exactly. It's been the most prominent proposal.
I said.
But it's faced numerous obstacles, including deep divisions within both Israeli and Palestinian societies, and a lack of political will to make the necessary compromises.
What about the role of the international community? Our sources seem to suggest they haven't done enough to address the situation.
From the Palestinian perspective, the international community has a responsibility to uphold international law and ensure that human rights are respected. They call for greater pressure on Israel to end the occupation and the blockade, and for increased humanitarian assistance to alleviate the suffering in Gaza.
But we've also talked about the complex political dynamics at play. Some countries seem to be turning a blind eye to what's happening in Gaza, while others are vocal in their condemnation.
That's true. There's a lax consensus within the international community on how to approach the conflict, which has hampered efforts to find a lasting solution.
So where does that leave us, the listener? It all seems pretty overwhelming.
It is easy to feel that way, given the complexity of the issue, but I think that's all the more reason for us as individuals to stay informed and engaged, understanding the nuances of the conflict, the historical context, and the different perspectives involved is crucial.
Knowledge is power, as they say.
Exactly. Even small actions can make a difference. Supporting humanitarian organizations working in Gaza, advocating for policy changes that promote peace and justice, even just talking to others about the situation and raising awareness.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play, no matter how small it may seem. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We are from ancient history to the modern-day conflict. We've explored the Palestinian perspective on the situation and touched upon potential paths
toward resolution.
It's been a journey through time and a glimpse into the complexities of one of the world's most intractable conflicts. And it's a journey that's far from over. The situation in Gaza is constantly evolving, and staying informed is key.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, I think it's time for our final thought-provoking questions,
Yeah.
something for you, the listener,
Yeah.
to ponder. Given what we've learned about Gaza's history, the ongoing conflict, and the humanitarian crisis, here's something to consider. Knowing that peace requires addressing the root causes of the conflict. What concrete steps can the international community take to ensure that human rights are upheld and international law is enforced in the region?
That's a weighty question, but incredibly important to contemplate. It underscores the fact that while the situation is incredibly complex, it's not hopeless.
Yeah, and we can't forget, at the heart of this are real people living with the consequences of these political decisions every single day.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in the headlines and the politics. But you're right, we have to remember the human cost of this conflict.
It's a reminder that peace isn't just about signing treaties. It's about creating a reality where everyone can live with dignity, security, and hope for the future.
Well said. And with that in mind, I think it's time
to bring our deep dive into Gaza
to a close. It's been a challenging but incredibly important conversation.
It certainly has, and I hope our listeners walk away with a deeper understanding of the complexities and a sense of urgency to learn more and engage with this issue.
To recap, we journeyed through Gaza's long history, starting with its ancient roots as a vibrant hub of culture and trade, and traced the path that led to the conflict we see today. We explored the Palestinian narrative, highlighting the impact of the blockade, the trauma of the military offensives, and the daily struggles of living through this humanitarian crisis.
They also discussed the complexities of international involvement, the search for a lasting peace, and the role that we as individuals can play in advocating for change.
We've covered a lot, but there's always more to learn.
Absolutely.
To our listeners, we encourage you to keep digging, stay engaged, and use your voice to support a more just and peaceful future.
For Gaza and everyone in the region.
Because ultimately, true peace goes beyond the absence of conflict. It's about the presence of justice for all.
Beautifully put. And on that note, we leave you to ponder the questions we've raised today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Gaza.
Until next time.